The world is still curious of whodunit of Nordstreams 1 and 2. Now we have various people coming out from the US government, Biden, Nuland, and even Blinken, Secretary of State, saying this is an opportunity. Some people should learn how to keep their mouths shut, unless it's intentional that they're coming out with these comments. The curious whodunit of Nordstreams 1 and 2. This is by Tom Luongo via Gold Goats and Guns blog on Zero Hedge. The old world broke this week. It was blown up cynically by someone who thought this would advance their agenda the most. The act of vandalizing a major piece of physical infrastructure, targeting civilian populations, is not unprecedented in history, but it does signal that everything we thought we knew about the rules of the current game was wrong. Well, for most people anyway. He says, when I spoke in June at the Ron Paul Institute Conference on Foreign Policy, I described the game of geopolitics as a 7-player game of the ancient Chinese game Go. And in that game, we've reached an inflection point where some factions are coalescing and others are splintering. The faction that is unwilling to compromise on their future is the most dangerous one at the table. My conclusion then was that those who think they are entitled to run the world will flip the game board. They will change the rules of the game without remorse or a case in the world for those they harm and the after effects of their actions. In fact, the chaos they engender is preferably to them than losing. We got the first inkling of this when the West did not just freeze Russia's foreign exchange reserves but seized them. Now, undersea assets in international waters are fair game. The good news is that this flipping of the game board was only a couple of gas pipelines. The potential is still for something far more unthinkable, and not that it's off the table. In the immediate aftermath of the proof the pipelines were blown up, everyone, including myself, came forward with their theory as to who did it. Sadly, I can construct arguments for nearly every major player in the game having done this, but understand the significance of this act. Another red line in international commerce and relations was crossed. The burning question is, by whom? We can rule out the most idiotic takes, like the Russians blew up their own pipelines themselves. Why blow up an asset, which is literally your biggest piece of leverage on this particular game board, when you can do what Putin has already done, shut off the gas taps? The only people putting forth this idea are frothing neocons who never met a global problem they couldn't blame on Putin or Russia. Their arguments simply confirm what we already knew, that they're jumping for joy at the news. Many are reflexively pointing to statements by Joe Biden and Victoria Nuland about getting rid of Nord Stream 2 pipeline before the war in Ukraine broke out. But so what? Why wait 7 months to make good on that threat? And why also take out Nord Stream 1 at the same time? The argument is based on this idea that the US is now a rogue state fully controlled by neocons who see their opportunity to get their geopolitical twofer going to war with Russia while also regaining dominance over a vassal Europe. Indeed, this is a prevailing sentiment across the whole of the anti-US alternative media, from Pepe Escobar to Bernard at Moon of Alabama. The rush to put together the motive, Escobar, and the means, MOA, is quite compelling. However, I do not agree. And the reasons are many, but it starts with the basic premise is that it is too easy. Sure, the neocons wanted Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 removed from the game board. Neocon staff the lion's share of important positions in the Biden National Security Council, his State Department, Antony Blinken, and the Department of Defense, but the neoconservative axis does not stop at the mouth of the Potomac, which is, of course, Washington, D.C. Their roots are deep within British intelligence, Whitehall, City of London, the banking area there, and yes, even Germany. When you invoke the term neocon, it is a very specific term for a very specific faction of people. They are rapacious, unwilling to compromise, indefatigable, and embedded like ticks all across the Western political and intelligence infrastructure. They are also incredibly easy to manipulate because all you have to do is give them a green light for mayhem and they will take it like a pit bull seeing a squealing rabbit. So while Bernard did a fine job of laying out all the circumstantial facts in this case, he did not make a conclusion either. He'll leave that job to his partner in anti-US empire leftist Escobar and the imaginations of so many rightfully disillusioned in the US. They and others have made the case, and all that has to be done now is to allow the amplifier of social media and global anxiety to run wild. Spoon-feeding people cynicism today is easy. Hating on the US is now fashionable. The groundwork for this has been laid for months, with Europe shooting itself in the foot repeatedly while allowing its sympathetic chorus to try and portray them as a victim of US aggression. Personally, I think that the conclusion is nonsense and have stuck to my guns for months, saying both the EU, the European Union, and the US want this war with Russia, but for different reasons. In other words, no one is a victim of the other's aggression. They both want the same thing, a divorce and/or a war with European integration, but who gets to be the decision makers in the end is what they are fighting over internally. I've laid this out in so many blog posts, but this one from January lays out all the arguments of the factions at play. While I was wrong about the war in Ukraine being off the table, the interplay of the factions was still spot on. The basic premise was always to use the neocons to destabilize the world over Ukraine, amplifying the US-UK belligerence to the level of terrorist state and portray Europe as a victim of whatever happened. But once Putin invaded Ukraine, everyone's true motives were exposed. Europe could not back down and allow Russia to take Ukraine because Davos needed Ukraine to draw everyone into its vortex. The Minsk agreements were simply a time-buying device for everyone's plans. They all wanted this war with Russia, but Putin chose the terms of the battle and the timing. To still think that Europe is a victim of US colonial ambitions betrays a naivety that borders on pathology. And yet everyone fell for the silly Rand Corporation report from January that prepped the ground for blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines, conveniently leaked into the world 2 weeks before the weekend everyone had circled on their geopolitical calendar as the most significant of the year. Okay, this being, of course, the beginning of Rosh Hashanah and the new Shemitah cycle. Yeah, and you could put my other leg, it plays There Is a Sucker Born Every Minute. Make no mistake, I'm not about to absolve the US of any malfeasance here. Some aspect of the US was involved. To think otherwise is also terminally naive. No, what I'm going to do is remind everyone of the motivations, incentives, and deficiencies of the players in the West, and give you what I think is the best answer we will ever get, and why, as to the curious whodunit of the demise of Nord Stream. I wrote a massive Twitter thread yesterday on this, which I'm going to list below, along with some fill-in commentary where appropriate. 1. Just so we are clear, I believe and have believed the hyper-aggressive neocons, or Straussians, are a faction easily manipulated into doing things that look like they are to be their benefit but ultimately aren't. 2. People this single-minded and radical can easily be directed like a missile at a particular target, especially if the target is their white whale, for example, Russia. 3. Davos is obsessed with preserving the EU and transferring that power to the UN for global government through the end of commercial banking and total surveillance. This is incontrovertibly true. They're pushing hard for CBDCs to replace the currency, that is digital currencies, to replace the the current monetary system. 4. Getting the neocons to overreact to the current state of play in Ukraine by blowing up 2 vital pipelines in Europe is child's play. You are goading them to do what they want to do anyway, screwing Germany and Russia simultaneously. Again, think pit bull and squealing bunny rabbit. 5. But the real win for them is not giving Germany no way back down WRT Russia. It's to get Germany to see themselves as a victim of US colonization. This leads to a critical mass of people seeing the US as the world's leading cancer, deflecting from the real perps. Given the state of the commentariat today, mission mostly accomplished. When the Fed pushes interest rates to the moon, this will be even easier for people to believe. 6, that is happening after the US got major wins in the UK and Italy election, electing Truss and Maloney, while the Fed starves global markets of dollars, the source of Davos' real strength, euro-dollar futures, and shadow banking. 7, in the short term, in the short run, the neocons think they'll have won a big victory. In the long run, it seals Europe's fate by crashing their markets so they can blame Russia and the US for their bankruptcy while defaulting and consolidating power in Brussels. Blowing up Nord Stream 1 and 2 is a brilliant tactical move. It takes options from Putin and leaves him with more military than economic options. Why does anyone think the EU and Davos don't benefit from this, since this is what they actually wanted, prolonging war with Russia? Or am I misreading EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, EU Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg? Curious, in the long run, this is a terrible strategic move because it now puts everyone's infrastructure on the table. Everything is fair game now. 8, France is happy to see this happen because bringing Germany down elevates them. Blackmailing the Italians is next on the flowchart. Has to happen while Italy is in a gas deficit, hence Libya is offline. I put in 3 videos ago, Italy energy crisis as Russia gas stops flowing as of yesterday, October 1st. France has been instrumental in cutting off Italy's gas supply from North Africa. There's no love lost between Italy and France, and EU sanctions keep Italy in gas deficit. With hostilities in Libya ending, gas will flow. So destabilizing Italy's financial markets now is paramount, or did no one see the blow-up in BTP yields this week? 9, the neocons are Straussian in their thinking. Better to burn down everything rather than lose. I don't agree with all of this article, but the basics are sound. 10, Europe's only solution, said many times by George Soros, is to default by issuing perpetual debt, consoles, and rolling up all the political power in Europe to the European Union Commission and the European Central Bank. To do that, you need a collapse of the German middle class. 11, but you also need a scapegoat to focus German anger on, otherwise you lose them. So bring in the hyper-aggressive Yanks and the hated Russians, perfect patsies for this operation. Turn Western Europe as anti-American as Eastern Europe is anti-Russian. 12, turning the US into a global terrorist state in the minds of everyone is an attempt, lame as it may be, to stop capital outflow while the reset of Europe's finances occurs. 13, hence the US neocons likely blew up Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, but under the guidance of Davos from within the Biden junta. 14, this was an act of war, no doubt. The UK and France have been trying to get NATO officially into a war with Russia since it moved into Syria. Remember the IL-20 Elend shootdown. That was a French-UK operation that everyone else covered up. 15, this pipeline explosion smells of a similar setup. The goal, same as always, get Russia to overreact, weaken Putin at home for being soft, set the US and Russia on a path to open, not proxy war. 16, the same strategy is being employed with China-Taiwan, reckless provocations to weaken Xi Jinping and get China to overreact to save face with the domestic population. 17, why? Because of these folks are all fighting while Europe hunkers down and rebuilds itself. Then they are all weakened through war, and relatively speaking, the EU comes out of that coma to a more level playing field. 18, this is the plan. It's stupid, it's insane, but it's clearly what's on the table. The leaked RAND report everyone was so hot and bothered about was pure psyops to set this up, latest atrocity. 19, if you think this is far-fetched, who directed everyone to lock down the world over a freaking flu? Who tried to bankrupt you from not getting a job? Who is pushing for UBI, MMT, and you owning nothing? It ain't the neocons and it ain't Russia. It ain't the Fed either. It's, of course, WEF, Klaus Schwab. 20, there are clearly forces resisting this insanity, but it's not clear as to whether they are winning or not. What is clear is that most people are done with globalists. By which globalists? 21. This now opens up the possibility of the East Med pipelines from Israel to Greece, which Biden took off the table earlier this year. And why? Davos wants us off oil and gas. 22. The bombing of Nord Stream 1 and 2 is as significant a red line being crossed as seizing Russia's forex reserves. Both assets were considered verboten, forbidden. Not anymore. Who ordered that? Davos. Who went along with that? The EU. Who's putting more sanctions on Russia today? The European Union. 23. The point of this act was to freeze all pipeline construction worldwide. If these assets are on the table, then nothing is off the table. Do you really think it's far-fetched to false flag something like this to achieve global dreams of control? Who has those dreams? If you look at this dispassionately, you know who, and that's why you know who ordered it, regardless of whose military operations put the bombs on the pipes. I can't stress enough, folks, that we are in a very perilous water here. I'm no U.S. apologist. This country has crimes that it will have to answer for, and the biggest one may be allowing these globalist assholes to corrupt it nearly beyond repair, but don't let that blind you to what's really happening. The important thing I keep trying to point out, that thinking in terms of the country is ultimately the wrong lens to view these people's actions. Factions are the better lens, factions across political borders. Only when you're talking about the people and elections do countries matter here and how they interact with these factions. I'll leave you with that and echo Bernard at MOA. Now draw your own conclusions. And this was by Tom Luongo via Goats and Guns blog on Surhedge. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.